The rules of the hustings are prescribed, so we don't get much discretion on them. So what we'll do is there's room for 10 minutes speech at the beginning by each candidate. The other candidate is not allowed to be in here to hear the other speech, although they did say they might be able to do the other person's speech because they both know it off by heart anyway. But we have to follow the rules, so it's one at a time, and then we've got time for questions. We've had questions that have been submitted in advance. If other people would like to ask questions, if you can put your hand up, I hope somebody from ALDC here has got some paper for people to put in to be able to give out so people can write their questions down. We have 2 roving mics, and we're going to ask people to say their question. We have it up here. If you can't remember what your question was, tough. We kind of expect you to remember what you were going to ask. And anyway, we seem to have a room full of doctors here from the handwriting that people have given. So my apologies if I get names wrong. And we're going to finish at 5 o'clock. There'll be 2 minutes for each candidate to answer questions, but I want to finish at 5. That's the advertised time when it should finish, and I'd like to keep things to time if that's at all possible. So we've done a tossed a coin for who's going to go first. So I'd first like to welcome Norman Lamb to come and speak to us now. Norman.
Oh, very good to see you all. There's nowhere to put my glass. So.
There's a stage.
Very good to see you, and I'm glad, incidentally, that there's no radio mic here, because in London last Wednesday, to 1,000 people, an auditorium with 1,000 people, I went out after doing my speech, and the first thing I said was, "Where's the loo?" Little did I know that it was broadcast to 1,000 people in the auditorium. I suppose it could have been worse. I could have got to the loo before they realised. This is a leadership election, and I can confidently predict that this is an election which will be won by a Liberal Democrat. I think we can all be relieved, thank you. But it is the first of very many. It's the first of very many. And I wanted to also say, just before I get into the main contribution I want to make, that I recognise that the last 5 years has been extraordinarily painful for this party and for very many people fighting and winning elections in their communities and then losing elections through absolutely no fault of their own. I recognise that completely, and I understand the pain that people feel and suffer as a result of losing in those circumstances. And it seems to me that it is up to all of us collectively, and incidentally, whoever wins this election, we are united. We must be united as a party to fight to win back that liberal voice in our country. There is no place for divisions, splits of anything of that sort. We must unite around whoever prevails in this leadership election. Now, before you make up your mind as to who to vote for, you will want to know what my motivation is, what drives me, what I'm about as an individual. You'll want to know what my ambition is for this party, and you'll want to know how I intend to try to achieve that ambition. So let me tell you first of all a bit about me. Well, way back in 1987, I won my seat for the first time on Norwich City Council. It was a ward which had been Conservative and then Labour. We had been in third place and we prevailed, and we ended up with every single member in that ward as a Liberal and then a Liberal Democrat. We got to the point in that ward where both myself and my wife Mary were councillors. Mary was a county councillor, and then we had a by-election and our lodger stood. And so we ended up with 3 councillors in the house, and you can imagine the amount of paperwork that came through our letterbox every single day. So I am at heart a grassroots campaigner. I then took on North Norfolk constituency, 15,500 votes behind the Conservatives, and an 11-year battle. Call me a sad man, but 11-year battle, and finally we prevailed with a majority of 483, creeping over the finishing line in 2001, but then building a majority and holding it ever since. And so for me, grassroots campaigning and the principle of community politics is at the heart of everything we should do. I want to say a bit more about that in a moment. But throughout my adult life, I have tried to live out my liberal values. So long before I was elected to Parliament, as a lawyer, I took on the MOD on behalf of 5,500 women who had been discharged from the armed forces for getting pregnant. The MOD had acted in breach of the Equal Treatment Directive, and we took them on and won compensation for those women who had been unlawfully discharged. As a new MP in Parliament, I took on Tony Blair. I wanted to know who he had been meeting in the run-up to the Iraq War, who had been influencing him. So I asked the question about who he'd been meeting at Chequers, and the answer inevitably came back, we don't answer that question. So I challenged him, and after a long battle, it led to a groundbreaking decision which established the really important principle that every citizen in our country is entitled to know who the Prime Minister meets, who every minister in the government meets, so that we know who is influencing them. I have to say that when I then became a minister and I was told I had to give details of every meeting I attended, I realised that, of course, that was my responsibility, but you have to live by what you believe in. And then as a campaigning minister in the Department of Health, fighting for the fundamental principle for me that people suffering from mental ill health must have equal access to treatment, equal access to evidence-based treatment as anyone else. And there is a scandal, really, a discrimination at the heart of our NHS, that if you suffer from mental ill health, you don't have the same right of access to treatment. So how can it be right that if you suffer from suspected cancer, you have a right to an appointment with a specialist within 2 weeks, and rightly so? But if you're a youngster who suffers a first episode of psychosis, something that can literally change your life and ruin your life and lead to a miserable life, probably on benefits, probably with difficult relationships, you have no right at all to access treatment on a timely basis. So that's why I'm incredibly proud that we introduced the first ever waiting time standards, maximum waiting time standards, including for early intervention in psychosis, to give youngsters in particular the chance of a good life, to rescue lives, to ensure that they can enjoy life just as any of the rest of us can. And we introduced it from April of this year. But in all of my work as a minister, I came across so many cases where families and individuals were treated as second-class citizens, too often ignored by the system, not listened to. I heard families saying to me, we're really concerned about our son or daughter who's been put in an institution, possibly hundreds of miles away from home. And when we raise concerns, nobody listens to us. So I would take on those cases on behalf of individuals and fight to ensure that commissioners actually listen to people. This is, for me, at the heart of my liberalism, but not just to take on individual cases, to come up with new proposals for rights for people, to challenge decisions, and to have control over the money that's available for your care. And I will hold the Tories to account to implement those new rights in this Parliament. It's essential that they do. And that sense of powerful citizens, everyone treated equally, goes through all of my values as a Liberal. So Labour councils, for example, do things to people in communities. Liberal Democrat councils empower people in their communities. That's what we are about when we are at our best. We give people power, control over their destiny, as communities and as individuals. And this country is one of the most centralised of any in Western Europe, apart from, incidentally, Malta, which I think has probably a justification for raising more tax than any other country because of the size of that particular country. But apart from Malta, we are the most centralised. So I argue for radical decentralisation of power, not just to run services, but where the money is raised, because that is where the power resides. And that again is at the heart of my liberalism, giving power to local authorities in charge of communities, giving power to communities. And it's that sense of the powerful citizen against the state that makes us absolutely determined to protect as far as we can the Human Rights Act against assault from this Conservative government. We must be at the front of that campaign to safeguard the Human Rights Act, which gives that power to individuals against the overbearing state. But along with that sense of powerful individuals, we must always celebrate diversity. We must reject conformity. And we must be intolerant of discrimination, of disadvantage, of entrenched poverty, wherever we see it. And then there is the central principle for Liberals, surely, that every child in our country should have the same right to flourish as individuals, to make the very most of their talents in life. And it is a sad reflection of our country that still there are too many children whose futures are determined by the circumstances of their birth. That's why the pupil premium is so potentially transformational. It changes individual children's lives. It gives them the chance, perhaps for the first time ever, to make a real go of things, to succeed as every other child can. And it's tragic that the Conservatives now are talking about undermining a transformational policy that we introduced in government as Liberal Democrats. And then on top of all of that, along with freedom, comes responsibility. Responsibility to one another in our communities, responsibility for the proper stewardship of our planet, and responsibility to future generations. These things are at the heart of what we are about as Liberals, and we must always fight for those values. So what is my ambition for the party? Well, I want us to think big. The world has changed completely. Change happens incredibly fast these days in politics. Look at the rise of the SNP and of UKIP. It changes rapidly in commerce as well. Household names on the high street, here one day, gone the next. Startups that suddenly catch fire and reach out to a massive audience and become very successful almost overnight. And I want us to think of ourselves in that light. Startups with a massive potential audience, because this is a liberal age. There are so many people out there who share our values, but who don't at the moment associate themselves with the Liberal Democrats. Our task, as we build a liberal, progressive, radical movement of change, is to reach out to those people and to convince them that this is the party that speaks to their values. Let's be audacious, let's be ambitious, let's believe that the Liberal Democrats can get into government in our own right. Let's not set a timescale, but let that be the ambition. Because there is no point in what we do unless we grab power in our communities and local government and nationally so that we can make a difference to people's lives. That must be what we are about, and we must be ambitious to achieve that objective. So how do we do it? Let me take you through the steps that we need to take. First of all, I believe we need root and branch reform of the way our party operates. I don't think, if we're honest, we always apply our liberal values to the way in which our party operates and behaves. There are too many committees that I get confused about myself. It leads to unaccountable power. We are not diverse. We are the least diverse party in our country. That, for Liberals, should be completely intolerable. We must make sure that everyone in our party is valued and has the chance to make a success of things within our party. And I want everyone involved in the policy-making process. So our democracy as a party is based on the idea that you go to the conference in September and then in March the following year. But these days, we can link everyone up electronically to our conference, and we could give everyone, all those new members that have joined our party, the chance to vote in key decisions about policy making at our party conference by linking them up electronically. Surely we should be leading the way in our internal democracy so that we give every member the chance to have their say. And then secondly, we must again become a really effective election winning machine. The truth is that we've fallen behind the curve nationally. Other parties have overtaken us. There's a wealth of skills in our party, including here in this room today. But it seems to me we must, across the country, return to our values of fighting to give power to people through the principle, the genuine principle of community politics. That must be the way in which we go back to winning elections again. It's the way I won elections myself, giving power to our communities, and it's the way very many of you in this room will have got power yourselves in your communities. Third, I want our party to become an intellectual powerhouse. Just think back to Joe Grimond, those of you who are old enough like me to remember Joe Grimond, that radical liberal in the 60s. He was ambitious for our party. He got thinkers, big thinkers from outside the party to come in to think about liberal solutions to the big challenges of that age. We need to do the same. We can't run on empty. We've got to win the battle of ideas. Let's think big. Let's get a liberal movement, dynamic movement going again so that we come up with the liberal responses to the big challenges that we face as a society today. And let me tell you this, if we can combine winning the battle of ideas with really effective campaigning, then we can become an unstoppable force. But you need both. And then finally, we've got to reach out to young people. Young people are overwhelmingly liberal in their attitudes. They think in a liberal way. They don't like the old ways of doing things. They are international, they're dynamic, they're open in their attitudes. They want reform of the antiquated drug laws, which criminalise so many people in our country and which hand billions of pounds to criminal networks across our world. They want equal access to mental health services. They want a party that will lead the case to combat the challenge of climate change. They want liberal solutions to our housing crisis. They want opportunity to achieve for themselves in life. We can be that party. We can be the party that inspires a new generation of young people, just like in the 60s, where 2,000 people attended young liberal conferences in those days. We can get back to that. And if we inspire a generation of young people, then our future will be secured. So let me end by just telling you this. There was a young liberal youth student who said to me recently about my work on mental health, particularly focusing on young people's mental health. She said, "You have restored my faith in politics." Now that meant an awful lot to me, because what I'm about is getting stuck in, trying to make a difference to people's lives, having an effect by the work that you do. And when she said that to me, it made me realise that we had achieved some really important things in government. But we, Liberal Democrats, can inspire and restore everyone's faith in politics by telling it straight, by telling it as it is, by speaking from our hearts, speaking to our values as Liberals. And if we do that, and if we are really ambitious, we can succeed. Together, we can succeed. We can get this party back into government. That must be our ambition if we want to make a difference to people's lives. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Norman. I was slightly generous with the time, but I shall make sure we do the same for Tim. Have we got a Tim loitering at the back, Jake? If not, could we go and find him? Just while we start, in terms of the first questions I've got, there are two people with radio mics, if you want to stand, who are Victor and Rob, one on either side. And I'm going to ask the person who's going to ask the question, and then the one that's going to come next, so you know who it's going to be, so we can get a radio mic to them. But you'll need to put your hands up so the guys can get to you. And it just means there's less time running around. So the first person is going to be Councillor Jeff Horsley, and the second one is going to be Councillor Clark from Cheadle and Gately. So when we get to the questions, if you know who you are, where you are, put your hands up. Okay, Jake, do we have another candidate?
1 minute.
I could sing if you like. Here we are, we have another candidate. Tim, welcome.
Well, Gerald, what makes a great speech? A great speech moves people from one place to another. It changes their mind. And on the morning of the 8th of May, I heard a great speech. And it came from the lips of Nick Clegg. And that was a speech, thank you, that was a speech that made it clear to everyone what the value of liberalism was, the value the Liberal Democrats had been and must be, and how soon we would be missed. And we didn't need to wait that long to find out that was true. And we in our hearts believe this to be true, and we look back and see what we achieved, and you just think what 5 years in power, 5 years we should be proud of, meant for our country. £2 billion of funding through the pupil premium to the very schools that Tories don't send their kids to. £8 billion worth of green energy funding, wrested out of a Chancellor who thinks all that stuff is not saving the planet, but green crap. And I'll tell you what makes me most proud. Nick Clegg went into number 10 and he expended vast amounts of personal political capital in order to set free the 5,000 children of asylum seekers who would have been detained in this last Parliament if it wasn't for him. He knew as he went into those meetings he would not win a single vote. Those 5,000 children of asylum seekers do not know who it is to whom they must be thankful. That is the measure of a man who I am still proud to call my leader. And that speech did move people. It moved people. Today, something like 18,000 people who woke up that morning horrified and saw the message from Nick Clegg and thought, yes, the penny dropped, yes, I need to be more than just a Liberal in here, I need to be a Liberal Democrat indeed, and that number is still rising. And I am proud of all those people who've joined us, because we may well feel demoralised and broken, so many of us, following the election on the 7th of May. But we are lifted and our spirits are raised and there is adrenaline pumping through our veins because we know that we are not alone, that there are tens of thousands of people out there who support our movement and want us to thrive and survive. But on the 7th of May, this party was ejected into the political wilderness. And the only thing that matters in this leadership election is how do we get out of it? How do we get out of it? And let's be honest, we also need to have a full understanding of what kind of wilderness we are in. You see, the loss of all our members of Parliament on the 7th of May was only half of it, if even that. For the last 10 years, we have been losing ground in local government. And so look, I don't want to give it all away tonight. I don't want to kind of tell you exactly what's going to happen in the next hour or so, but let me share with you this. Two real Liberals will stand up here. They will agree with each other on 99% of matters. Even the grumpiest of you will agree with us on 95% of matters. No names mentioned. And we will agree with us, and we will agree on our policies and our principles and ideals. And here's the tragedy. We can do naff all about them when we're out of power. So you may have lots of questions for me and for Norman. I hope so. But I don't want to be impertinent. I've got one question for you. Do you want to win? Do you want to win? Yeah. Because if you do, I am your man. Because I am stood here because I am not having the party of Gladstone, Lloyd George and Grimmond die on my watch. And I am not having the party that rescued and ran so well the cities of Manchester, Sheffield, Hull and Newcastle for so many years, so well in the past. I'm not having them disappear off the horizon, over the horizon. I want our position in local government to grow and to thrive. Winning is all that matters, because if you lose, you are robbed of the ability to change people's lives. So, what drives me and what has driven me, what drove me when I got elected to Lancashire County Council just shy of my 23rd birthday, and to South Ribble District Council a couple of years later, and to South Lakeland District Council, 11 years ago now, I guess is my background and where I come from. You know, in politics it's very important that people know who you are. I suspect often we lose votes because people don't know who we are. So who am I? Well, I was brought up a little bit further north than here, not much, in the city now of Preston. And I was brought up, let's be honest, in some poverty. Me and my little sister, raised by a single mum. And we had very little. And as I looked around me, my mates, all the people at school, half of our parents were out of work from one time or another, sometimes most of the time. And we had very little. And I think the measure of a great parent is you never knew you were poor until many, many years later. Because my childhood was incredibly happy, by the way. And I never knew we were poor, and what really struck me, I suppose, and when it really dawned upon me, was when my grandmother passed away in my late 20s. And I was washing up the day of her funeral with my mum. And we talked about the fact that my grandmother's wedding ring had been melted into my great-grandmother's wedding ring. I just said to my mum, whatever happened to your wedding ring? Whatever happened to it? She just said, I pawned it to feed you when you were 7. I think, crumbs. And I then think, how did I end up in a situation where I ended up going to university and getting a half-decent job and then ended up here? How did that happen? Well, I think it happened because I was fortunate or blessed enough to have a bloody-minded parent who never knew when she was beaten. No wonder I became a Liberal Democrat. And you shouldn't have to be that blessed and that lucky to make it in life. That's the point. When I look around the people I grew up with and who I still know, my friends, those people from that part of Lancashire, I kind of look around them and I don't feel pity. I just think, what a waste. What a waste of wonderful people and wonderful talent. Because inequality in this country is the scourge of this country. You have got much more chance of being poorly paid if you're a woman than if you're a man. If you are a white person, you will probably be paid more than if you are not a white person. If you are LGBT+, you will have fewer life chances than if you are not. If you are from some regions of the country, this included, you will end up with fewer life chances than if you are from others. And the reality is this. Inequality is not just immoral, it is immoral, but it is also utterly and totally stupid. If you ran a country, or ran a company, and you only made use of 20% of your staff, and 20% of your space, you would be an idiot and you would fail, and that is Britain. So we want to be not just of the view that we are against inequality, because inequality is bad. We are for equality because equality is good. And I fear that too often we spend a lot of time telling people what we are against and not what we are for. Because in politics, it's all about who you are. And I want us to say things in these next few months, in these next few years, that don't just tell people what we will do, but tell people who we are. We are the kind of people who are outward-looking, generous-spirited, internationalist, anti-nationalist. Therefore, we will lead the fight to keep the UK in the European Union. We are the kind of people who don't just think about today, we think about tomorrow. We don't just care about you, we care about your children and their children. Therefore, we will lead the fight against climate change. We are the kind of people who know that nothing robs you more of your dignity or your liberty than poverty and poor housing. Therefore, we will be the party, probably the only party, who will stand firm against Cameron's sell-off of housing association properties. And who are we? Those things brought together tell people who we are. We are the kind of people who trust people. We are the kind of people who think the best of people. And we plan for the best of people. So look, as I stand here and I look at where we are today and we look at the situation our party finds ourselves in, we of course can take some level of heart from the fact that this is not, as many of you will know, our first near-death experience. And the fact that under Grimmond and Steele and Paddy Ashdown, thanks to the revival in our local government base under those three great leaders, particularly under Paddy Ashdown in the late 80s and early 90s, the fact that happened should not make us complacent. We never survived in the past by accident. We have no automatic right to pull through. You have seen this last 6 weeks with the attack on human rights, the attack on personal security in terms of our ability to be on the internet and not snooped on by Big Brother, on those attacks of 12 billion potential cuts in benefits. You have seen these last 6 weeks how essential it is that this party survives and thrives. It is essential that we survive, but it is not inevitable. We have to earn every single one of the building blocks that will build and create that recovery. And it's not good enough just to want and wish the Liberal Democrats to be better and to come back. You have to plan for it. You have to make it so. So I have a plan. And you are looking at, I'm afraid, the only Liberal Democrat candidate in the election that just passed who got more than 50% of the vote. In Westmoreland, don't clap, it's an outrage. It's an outrage. You are looking at the only part of mainland Britain where the Liberal Democrats came first in the European elections last May. And even those blooming dreadful police commissioner elections that we want to get rid of, 3.5 years ago, the only place in the UK the Lib Dems came first, yep, South Lakeland. And that's not an accident. It's because the way we operate, the way I operate, is to build teams and to inspire them and to motivate them and to direct them and to lead them. We have not a few hundred, we have 2,000 volunteers in Westmoreland. That is why we won. That is why when the tsunami came crashing over, there's a big flipping Everest that we were on the top of and we didn't get wet. And my job is to make sure every councillor, every MP, every potential candidate in this country is equally elevated and out of the way of harm, because we need to serve the people of this country, and that means we need to build an infrastructure and a movement that will protect us all from defeat, better still, launch us on the way to victory. So, as we consider who might be our next leader, I think it's just worth, if you wouldn't mind, I'll spend a few seconds reflecting on our fallen leader. 2 days ago, several of us, Norman and I included, were at the Bute Hall at Glasgow University as we celebrated the life of Charles Kennedy. I want to reflect on why he was a great man, and he absolutely was a great man. 3 things. First, he was human. Everybody could say that, but what it meant was that his word got through to people. If you had ever tried to put people on message, and there's 1 or 2 people in here who tried to put Charles Kennedy on message and they've got very little hair left, if you tried to put Charles Kennedy on message, you would find that he was always on message. It was his message. And it was true, and it came through, and he cut through, and people listened, because if people trust the messenger, they will hear the message. He was human. He was principled. It's easy now, looking back after 12 years, to think that the opposition to the Iraq War was the easy populist decision to take back in 2003. You know that it was not. You know that Charles Kennedy was bayed and heckled at by Tories and Labour alike, called Charlie Chamberlain the traitor, as he stood up proudly in favour of international institutions and against that illegal and immoral Iraq war that he so rightly called, and he rightly called, would be counterproductive. And those newspapers, I'm sad to say, tabloid press often, who lauded him and honoured him in their write-ups and their obituaries 2 weeks ago, they're the very papers who had him depicted as the slippery traitor Charles Kennedy who wouldn't back our boys in the Gulf. I tell you, they were wrong, and Charles Kennedy today stands proud as being absolutely right, and I am proud of Charles Kennedy. Human, principled, effective. This is the guy who led us to our largest number of MPs since Lloyd George's day, and I want to suggest this to you. This is my hypothesis. You see, human, principled, effective, the 3 are sequentially connected. The fact is, the good guys can win. We have just been through an election where the bad guys were smarter, where the bad guys understood the mood of the electorate, where the bad guys outspent and out-campaigned, and the bad guys won. Charles Kennedy is the proof that does not always have to be the case. And I want to lead this party to the position where the good guys can be ruthless, where the good guys win, because the people need them to win. And so I don't want you to select one leader in this contest. We need 62,000 leaders who are going to lift us as a party and as a movement back from the brink, back to the centre. I am convinced that we have been gathered together for such a time as this. If you elect me your leader, your feet will hurt because you will deliver more leaflets, more than you ever have done before. Your bank balances will hurt because you will donate more than you can afford. Your shoulders will hurt from whacking up state boards that you wouldn't like to do, and your faces will ache from the mile-wide grins you will have because we are going to win again.
Thank you very much. Jake, have we got a Norman on his way back? Okay, colleagues, I'm going to put the two gentlemen together as they seem to be very complimentary of each other. We hope they don't fight. First off, we need to find out Jeff Horsley, where are you? Have you got a mic with you, Rob?
Yes, I
You have? Wait a second, then you haven't got a second candidate. Norman, welcome back. Okay, Jeff, first question.
Jeff Horsley from Taunton. Can I actually, Gerald, I'd like to put, you've got my question there. I'm very happy for you to read the contents of my question. I trust myself to be absolutely spot on. But it is about the relationship between us councillors and the parliamentary party. I'd be very grateful if you read it verbatim, please.
Thank you, Jeff. And I can even read yours. Okay, this is from Jeff.
He's not one of the doctors.
No, he isn't. He's good. As this is a hustings session mainly for local councillors, can the candidates assure us they will genuinely enter into a two-way dialogue with their local foot soldiers in shaping the future direction of travel for the party? This is against the background of many councillors feeling that their role during the coalition was so subservient to the parliamentary party that they felt little more than cannon fodder and on occasions in our number and indicative of the fact. Gentlemen, Tim, do you want to go first? Norman second. You're limited to 2 minutes.
Okay. I mean, I certainly recognise that that sense amongst, I don't want to say the local government community, because I don't think of myself as being part of the parliamentary party. I think of myself as being a Liberal Democrat. And I joined the party when I was 16 to try and win elections, and it never occurred to me I might be a candidate one day. And so, you know, I was a councillor, county councillor, district councillor, borough councillor, most of my time in opposition, although I spent 2 years, very happy years, as a backbencher in Liberal Democrat-controlled South Lakeland as well. My view, though, is that there's been a sense during the coalition period that it would all get better at the end, and that the defeats that happened during the 5 years were very regrettable, but that's mid-term for you. I was often that poor sap who had to go on the election night programme at 1 o'clock in the morning and explain the devastation. And I never explained the loss of council seats as collateral damage or mid-term blues, because these are my mates losing their seats and they didn't deserve to lose their seats. And what we need to think again about is how we as a party think of local government. You see, for far too long, for maybe a period of time, long before the coalition, we have as a party perhaps seen winning the local council seat as a stepping stone to being an MP, and winning councillors as a stepping stone to winning the parliamentary seat. That is an insult. The reality is, you know, I'm sure I'll talk to you later on about my pride in building council houses in South Lakeland. I don't build them, Peter Thornton builds them. The council, who are led by Liberal Democrats, the Liberal Democrat councillors in South Lakeland are far more powerful than I am. And I want us to understand as a party that if we trust in people and we believe in community politics, then we believe that winning local council seats, whether it's just one seat in a council or winning control of a council, is just as precious, just as important as being a member of Parliament.
Well, first of all, I completely agree with that. If we are true to our liberal values, we are about giving power back to the lowest possible level and giving genuine power to communities. And so that means we must be, logically, completely in favour of winning council elections for their own sake, not as a means to an end. And that is a principle that we must return to. I tried to demonstrate, I don't know whether any of you are here from sort of social care, but or who represent or have social care portfolios, but I tried to demonstrate in my role as a minister for care and support that I would always be prepared to work closely, to engage with and discuss and debate with my colleagues representing social care across councils in England, well in England in particular, because that was my portfolio. And that's the way I am. That's the way I do business. I do not like to lord it over people. I like to reach conclusions collaboratively. And if we are to rebuild our party, we have to have spokespersons for all of the key responsibilities, way beyond the parliamentary party. We've got 8 of us, for goodness sake. So let's use all the talent in local government to ensure that we have and build the profile of spokespersons across the necessary portfolios from the much wider party, and local government can play an absolutely key role in that.
Okay, thank you very much, Norm. Okay, we've now got Sam Clark from Cheadle and Gately. Where are you? There we are. We need a microphone down at the front, Rob. Madam, you put in 2 questions. You choose which one you'd like to ask. Miss Clark.
Well, the first thought was how delighted I was that you 2 gentlemen were re-elected in May.
We were quite relieved, relatively speaking.
But I wondered if you were able to pinpoint why it was that so many equally admirable candidates were not.
Norman, you want to go first? We'll swap about.
Well, this, I suppose, makes me think that phrase we tend to use, where we work, we win, is not actually the full story. Because everybody in this party worked their socks off and worked themselves into the ground in this election, and very many, both in parliamentary elections and in local elections, didn't win despite working incredibly hard. And so there were forces beyond individuals' controls at work here. And in a way, having talked to a lot of really much-loved colleagues who've lost their seats, in a way it's a bit easier for them because there's no personal blame involved here. This was a tsunami. And we all know that elections are won and lost through emotion, not through individual policy platforms. And this election was predominantly driven by fear. And we, of course, made mistakes, big mistakes, during the period of the coalition. But overwhelmingly, I felt it in my seat in that last week. People, when they came to make up their minds, just very scared, whether we like it or whether we agreed with it, scared of Miliband and being bullied around by the SNP. And it was a very powerful force, ruthlessly exploited by the Tories with an enormous investment of money. And that's something that needs to change. The election funding rules that allow the Tories to spend a fortune in our individual seats based on national campaigning but targeted at individual seats. That is an outrage and it has to change. But it's no individual person's fault. It was the mistakes of 5 years, despite all of the good things we achieved, the loss of us talking about our values. Just one final point, Gerald. My heart sank when we were all told we must follow the mantra, we will cut less than the Conservatives and borrow less than Labour, because that defined us in relation to others. It said nothing about what we were as Liberals, as Liberal Democrats. And we need to return again to speaking about what motivates us and what we are and what our values are.
Sorry, I should have said earlier, could Mohammed Sadiq from Sutton be the next speaker? Can you wave? Where are you, Mohammed? There we are. Rob, right at the front. Tim.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, well, thank you for congratulating us on our return. I got a text, rather a grim one, from a former colleague, well, still a colleague, but former parliamentarian, about 2 days afterwards, after I'd communicated with him, and he just said this might be an occasion where the living envy the dead. I thought, blimey, that's grim. Obviously, mentioning no names, but he may have been once the business secretary. And if you don't laugh, you cry. And the reality is that we saw a defeat coming. Of course we did. And there is no justice in so much of it. You know, here in Manchester, John Leach and his team worked harder, worked better than just about anybody else in the entire country, and they got swept away. There is no flipping justice. And I think across the country that was the case for so many people. Doesn't mean he wasn't without cause. And I think clearly as we went into power 5 years ago, we did absolutely the right thing. Absolutely the right thing. The alternatives, I'm not even going to bore you with what the alternatives were, but they were a lot worse. And surely, you know, I'm sure we didn't join the Liberal Democrats as a career move. But I hope we didn't join as a cop-out either. You know, we chose the tough, long, right road to power. And when power presents itself to us, you should jolly well take it and make best use of it. But there's some things we clearly did wrong that set the tone, that made it was very hard for us to come back from. And I remember the beginnings of the Rose Garden episode. I remember Greg Mulholland and I sat watching the telly as David and Nick sort of went into number 10. And I said to Greg, I said, bloomin' heck, that feels like watching your wife run off with another bloke. He's ours, you know. And I thought, well, if I think that, what does the world think? And it's easy to be clever after the fact, isn't it? But obviously that, you know, that first few weeks cost us some percentage share of the vote, and clearly the loss of trust after fees cost us the rest. But I think when all said and done, what that all meant, despite the wonderful things that we achieved in the 5 years that we've talked about already, is that we got to polling day on the 7th of May without people knowing who we were and what we were for. We did all sorts of things. Matt said we weren't as bad as them, we weren't as bad as them. We gave people lots of good reasons to give us a second preference under AV. We don't have AV. And so we need to give people reasons to give us their cross and their first preference and be proud of who we are and know that they are like we are. Those people who felt it was not their fault, collectively, maybe, it was our fault. We should want to take power again, but we should learn the lessons.
Okay, next on the list, Prue Bray. Where's Prue? There we are, Victor Bray. Mohammed Sadiq, who's Mayor of Sutton.
Thank you. My question to both of you is, how would you attract and convince more ethnic minority voters to join our party and to vote for us? Thanks.
Tim?
Okay, I mean, community politics, which we must absolutely reboot. We mustn't convince ourselves that we have some kind of massive advantage over the other parties in the way in which we communicate with communities. They may do it just to win elections, but I tell you what, we have just got out of practice of doing it properly. Because real community politics is immersion politics. It's being in the community. You don't do community politics from outside. You do it from inside. You do it by being part of that community and alongside it. And that means if we're going to address the shocking fact that we have in this party, it's been 100 years since a non-white Liberal Democrat parliamentarian was elected at a general election. That is an absolute flaming disgrace. And we have to do something about that. And I take the view that we need to do 3 things. The first is structural. We need to make sure that when we're selecting candidates for our winnable seats next time round, and in the European parliamentary elections and all the elections we have to face over the next 5 years, we are absolutely sure through positive action we have at least 10% of those candidates being BAME. Secondly, we need to do what I've just said. We need to immerse ourselves in communities and understand them. Not just go to the odd meeting. If you're going to go to the mosque, you've got to spend time there properly. You've got to engage. You've got to understand what makes people tick and get inside their communities and help them and understand them. Because, as we've said, politics is about emotion. Who feels right? Who do you feel is like you? Who's on your side? But here's the third thing. And it's a little bit more straightforward because leaders need to lead, and to lead is to choose. And if I am the leader, my most important job with diversity is to make sure I'm surrounded by people who are diverse. Far too often you have leaders who are surrounded by people who are just like them. People who are younger, people who are whiter, people who are maler, people who are straighter, people who are more London-based, Westminster-focused. And if you want to be a leader of a party who is going to reach out and change the structure and the ethnic balance of the party, make us diverse, you have to look at your diary every morning, and if 9 out of 10 of your meetings in your diary are with white blokes, rip your flipping diary up and start again.
First of all, we have to confront the failure that we are responsible for in our party, because we, I said earlier, we are the least diverse party in British politics, and that's a dreadful indictment of a Liberal party, which cuts completely against what we should be about, giving opportunity to everyone. And if we do not look like modern Britain, why on earth would someone from a minority ethnic group think that this party can represent them? We will fail completely. So that's why I say we need root and branch reform of the way our party behaves and operates, to give everyone the chance to participate. And, you know, I don't believe the view, the sort of laissez-faire view that positive action is illiberal. There are moments in time where if you look at an organisation or at a society and you recognise that through culture people lose out, people, whether it's through gender or through race or for any other reason, then that is not a fair liberal society, or it's not a fair or liberal organisation, because it's not based on the idea that every single person has the same chance to succeed through their own talents and their own motivation. And so there is an obligation, it seems to me, on a liberal basis to ensure that everyone gets the chance to succeed, and therefore you need, on a temporary basis, to take positive action to correct that cultural imbalance. And we need to make the case for that, in my view, within our party. But I also just wanted to add this about looking out beyond our party. David Cameron made a speech a couple of days ago talking about relations within our country, and particularly the Muslim community. Instead of going to Bradford or to Birmingham or to Dewsbury, he did it from Bratislava. He pre-briefed the Daily Mail, who splashed a headline which was designed to create division in our country. That is a disgrace. And we, as Liberals, as Liberal Democrats, should be out there engaging with these communities, understanding them better. Actually, Baroness Farzi wrote a very good article this morning in the Guardian, making the case that politicians should be going and understanding these communities and committing to work in partnership with them. Now, if we do that from the position we're in our local government representation and from Parliament, then we might start to be recognised as people who are genuine and sincere and wanting to make a difference. Until we do that, we will keep failing.
Thank you, Noel. Okay, Prue, where are you? Hold on a second, and it's Mark Bennett from Tameside next. Where's Mark? Down at the front, Rob. Prue.
I'm Prue Gray from Woking, and my question is, if you were leader, what would you do how would you go about building an effective Liberal Democrat campaign for more social and affordable housing in this country?
Okay, well, this is one of the biggest failures of public policy over the last several decades, and successive governments have been responsible for this failure. So the first step I would take is to absolutely oppose all the way the Conservative plans to force local housing associations to sell off their properties. That is a disgrace, and it's a right to bribe, not a right to buy. The idea that these organisations, often charitable organisations based in communities, set up for a purpose to provide low-cost, good quality accommodation to people who can't afford to buy. To undermine that by forcing them to sell is outrageous, and we need to be right at the forefront of the campaign against that. Secondly, and this is a problem particularly in London, but not exclusively to London, I find it completely outrageous that there are people who buy properties purely as an investment and leave them empty. Homes are for people to live in. And the idea that in our capital city there can be so many people in desperate housing need, whilst there's a vast number of homes standing empty as investments, is a moral outrage. And we ought to apply punitive tax rates, just as they do in New York. You know, the land of the free, America, they do that in New York. We should do exactly the same in our capital city, and wherever there are other hotspots where that sort of practice is going on. And then thirdly, because there is such a failure of public policy, central government and local government should use their power, and if necessary be freed up to borrow, together with housing associations, to commission directly And government, central government can play a role here, on vacant public sector land to build homes directly for people to rent. Good quality, low cost homes, high energy standards, and use the rental income from those to then fund more affordable social housing. There is an imperative that we do this, and it must be the top priority for our party that we address this problem with liberal solutions.
Tim?
So, Prue, how do we run a campaign? And that's critical. I would say, first of all, I spent the last 2 years working with the Joseph Rowntree Reform Trust to make sure that we develop policies on housing, good, gritty, effective policies on housing. Those policies got into our manifesto, and folks at Shelter and the National Housing Federation both said that ours was the best manifesto when it came to housing. We've got an awful lot of stuff to work with. The reality is when you've got 8 MPs, you are not going to cover every department. We're not going to play the shadow cabinet game with 8 members of parliament. That solves that question for us. So instead, you pick a handful of really, really important issues that you get out there and you change minds on and you win attention for and you claim them as absolutely ours. And housing is my number one. And I'll tell you why. First of all, everybody's going to live somewhere. And even if your housing situation is comfortable, the reality is your children or your grandchildren, people you know, they will not be comfortable. And we know that there are pinch points in this parliament, and the first one, obviously, is the sale of housing association properties. And the Tories are taking the chance that their pitch to aspirational Britain means that the housing sell-off will work. And they challenge Labour to join them or oppose them. And the Labour Party, if you listen to all of their leadership candidates, with the exception of Comrade Corbyn, they will all sit on the fence because they don't want to cheese off the aspirational voters in the lab con marginals. Do you know what? My aspiration is those 2 billion people sat stewing on our waiting list. That's what my aspiration is for. And so how do we do it? It's an integrated campaign. We use the time we have in Parliament to make sure we put through motions, early day motions, questions, use question time, use opposition day debates to make that issue ours. I am a total and utter leech on the wall of the Millbank Towers where all the TV and radio broadcasting studios are to make sure I talk about housing. You know you've got to deliver 10 focus leaflets before people will read 2 of them. You've got to do the same with your appearances on the media and talk about housing. And in every local government publication, every councillor's focus, that's got to be our issue. It's got to be something that we own in our communities. And knowing that not just fighting the sell-off, but also fighting for the right for housing associations to build, to borrow against the value of the stock so they can go forward. Because we take a chance on trusting the people of Britain. The people of Britain remember the 80s and see in their towns and villages all of those council houses sold off now. They realise the damage that was done then. They see the damage that is about to be done. They will approve of the party and vote for the party that leads the fight against that.
Just on a note of fairness, I think both our candidates are drifting slightly over the time frame, so if you could both keep your comments circumspect. So, Mark, and the next one to follow it is Colin. I think it's Bremer from Edisbury. Colin, are you here? Yes, and there's a microphone coming down with Victor to you now. Mark.
Hello, Mark Bennett from Tameside. I'm a new member, and I'd be interested to know if the candidates, if they weren't in Hustings here in Manchester, would they be joining the anti-austerity protest in London?
Tim.
That's a great question. I mean, I've seen all of those placards. I've been looking on the web whilst we're here. And of course it contains all sorts of people on that march, all sorts of kind of colourful different brands of Trotskyist. And you know, and as you know, they all hate each other far more than they hate us. And it's very interesting. And I think that part of me wants to say, look, if you want to be taken seriously, and we've got, you know, lots of hammering out of being in coalition, we've also got some good stuff. 2 things that we've got from being in coalition. Thing 1, the sense that Liberal Democrats can be competent in power. Thing 2, a sense of economic credibility. And that's what we're going to be careful with. You chuck, if we, you know, we've got a little bit of baby left from the bathwater that's been thrown out. Let's not chuck that out too. We need to be very careful in that case. The thing is, though, when we stand up and call against the government for 12 billion in welfare cuts, when we stand up and call the government against what is bound to be the cuts in schools and the cuts in police spending, we can stand up and do so with credibility because we made it absolutely clear that we would indeed clear the deficit, but we would do so by not balancing the books on the backs of the poor, by more cuts that we can't afford, but by raising taxes on the wealthy. The Labour Party, because they spent 5 years going on anti-austerity marches effectively, they've had a long 5-year anti-austerity march under Miliband, and it's got them nothing because they lost trust. So our job is to make sure that we do lead the moral case against the cuts, and we do lead that on the basis of being seen as still a party that is credible in a way the Labour Party cannot be. But having said that, I've been on lots of marches with Trotskyists in the past against the Iraq War and everything else you could possibly imagine, so why not join them again?
And Tim and I were on a protest in Parliament on Whitehall about 3 weeks ago with a whole load of Trots campaigning against the Tories' threat to the Human Rights Act. So we will join cause with others when we agree on particular issues, and I think that's a really important principle. I agree with Tim that we've got to maintain our economic discipline. That's really important. But we cannot be hair-shirted about it, and we have to be rational in our response. And the Tory plan, which is based entirely on cutting and on achieving a surplus, this is an ideological drive to a smaller state. And I totally reject that. I believe in the case for active, enabling government. As Liberals, that's something that we should absolutely support. And actually, this is a period of historically low interest rates. So actually there is an economic case for investing in infrastructure development. And I would just give you 3 ideas. First of all, broadband. If we are to be a really effective modern economy, we have to make a big investment in broadband across our country. And we are falling behind many other countries in that regard. And that will help everyone, including the most disadvantaged, if we help fuel economic activity through really fast broadband speeds across our country, rural and urban Britain. Secondly, I would like, and this would bring jobs and real benefits, government is prepared to fund tax cuts to the tunes of billions of pounds. Why not instead fund over a 2-year period the insulation of every home in our country? We have the worst insulated housing stock of any country in Europe. It's a failure of public policy. So let's fund it. Let's achieve a saving in our energy costs for every family in our country and a massive reduction in carbon. And then finally, this is a big gain for public health. Let's make every town and city cycle friendly. We would achieve an incredible gain for public health. We would reduce carbon. We would reduce pollution in our towns and cities. You go to France, you go to Germany, you go to Holland and Denmark. They are all miles ahead of us. So these big infrastructure projects, they're all liberal in their intent, and they can all achieve jobs and prosperity for our country, and they make an investment at a time of historically low interest rates.
Thank you very much indeed. Colin is next, followed by Fiona Hewer from Maidenhead. Fiona, you've asked 2 questions. You need to choose which one you're going to ask. So, Colin, first.
Good afternoon. Colin Rymer from Edinburgh. I've listened with interest to both of your contributions in terms of rebuilding the party and future strategy.
Can you keep the microphone close to your mouth?
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, I hope you're aware of some of the statements that Paddy Ashdown has come out with today in the national press, and I'd be interested in your views about the benefits of forming alliances with Greens and liberal-minded people in the Labour Party with a view to forming an alliance that will actually help depose this Conservative government.
Norman?
Well, first of all, I would say that I'm not a tribal politician. I believe in plural politics, working with others where we agree on things. And so there are some big causes, including the cause of electoral reform, to achieve proportional representation in our country, where we must find common cause with others. It is, after all, a disgrace that 25% of people voted UKIP, Lib Dem and Green and got 10 MPs. And just 2.5%, I think, voted SNP and got 56 MPs. That is a democratic outrage. So where we can find common cause, and there are other issues, entrenched poverty, disadvantage, yes, we should be prepared to work with others. And if we can build alliances to, in a sense, build the progressive, liberal, radical movement of change that I'm referring to, and which I want this party to be at the fulcrum of, then we should be prepared to work with others. And I think if we can get to 2020 and get him to a point, and it's going to be very interesting with the Labour Party in this 5 years, if they conclude from their self-interest that they can't win power under the current electoral system, which they may just do, then we can build a very powerful consensus, and we have every other party in our country, apart from the Conservatives, making the case for reform. And that could be very powerful. So look, yes, we should be prepared to work with others. And the interesting thing, final thing I'd say is, in 1997, there was a sense of a progressive movement of change. And where Labour were not in the game, progressives were prepared to vote Liberal Democrat to defeat Tories. And that's quite an attractive proposition, isn't it? So let's try and get back to that.
Yes, so Paddy rang me up yesterday to tell me he was going to say this. I said, thanks, Paddy. I mean, when all said and done, let's just analyse what happened at the general election. It took me a few days, if I'm honest with you, before I could actually bring myself to look at the results in detail. I mean, I was just so grim. When you do take the time to look, particularly at the seats that we lost to the Conservatives, what you saw was that perhaps what we all assumed cost us the election wasn't the whole story. We've all assumed it was down to the terror of a weak Miliband dog wagged by a sturgeon tail, and that's what drove people to the Tories. Do you know, I think that was part of the answer, but it's not all of it. Because if you look at what tended to happen in those former Lib Dem seats now held by Tories, the Liberal Democrat, well, the Tory vote will have gone up by 1,000 or 2, and the Liberal Democrat vote fell by 7, 8, 9, 10,000. What happened to those votes? And they were, if you like, the evaporation of the Liberal Democrat coalition in those constituencies, to Labour, to Green, and some, let's be honest, to UKIP, as well as to the Tories. And if we're going to win those seats back, we have to make sure we bring that coalition back together. Now, frankly, any talk of pacts or deals with the Labour Party and the other party, I'll have none of. I am proud to be a Liberal. We stand as Liberal Democrats. We are not having coalition or pacts with anybody. But I really hope and pray that the Labour Party elects somebody who is not tribal and who is sufficiently self-aware to know the game is up for them when it comes to first past the post. And I hope that that person, when they answer the phone, will agree with me that after I have, as Liberal Democrat leader, presented to the House of Commons a great Reform Act that calls for the introduction of proportional representation right now, and with my 8 colleagues, I'll be certain that I will lose it, that we will get together, not just Labour and the Liberal Democrats, but the Greens, flipping UKIP, the SNP and Plaid Cymru, and we will put together a convention, an agreed compromise position on proportional representation that will go into each of our manifestos come 2020, when there is a non-Tory government, a non-Tory majority in Westminster. We have a mandate to deliver electoral reform. I passionately and sincerely believe 2020 could be the last time we fight a general election in the first past the post.
So Fiona, have you got a mic? Great.
Yes,
and the next one is Holly Matthews. Holly, where are you? Okay, lovely. Holly with a beard at the back. So, Fiona.
Thank you. Fiona Hewer from Maidenhead Liberal Democrats, also the Association of Liberal Democrat Engineers and Scientists. I want to ask about investment in British science. The EU has suggested a target of 2% of GDPs for countries to invest in science. Would you support the UK increasing investment in science to meet that target?
And that goes to Tim.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I would. I mean, I think we need to understand what the meaning of the word science and the meaning of the word investment. And the reality of investment is that you put money into something that pays back. And there is no doubt whatsoever that a knowledge-based economy is one that will grow. And if we use and value, I mean, the fact that we have in this country, 5 of the top 20 universities on planet Earth, we need to understand why that is the case. We should be really proud. This little island, 5 of the top 20 universities on the whole planet. And so we need to understand that we have a strong position, but not one that is permanent. And there are many other countries that are outstripping us in science and in engineering. And one of the ways we do that and achieve that position at the top, towards the top of the tree, and get better, is by embracing the world that we're in now, and embrace the fact that whilst we must retain our financial and fiscal credibility on balancing the books on the revenue spending, by golly, if you're sensible with capital, you can borrow to invest. And if I think about climate change, it may or may not come up later on, that's the biggest earthly threat we face. And the answers are about inspiring people to understand the gravity of that situation, what it means to their lives. But it's also about inspiring people to understand that there are solutions, and those solutions are engineering and science-based solutions. The fact that 95% of the supply chain for hydro, marine and tidal in this country is British, and the fact that investment in science is investment in Britain. So I want us to be the country that leads the way on a whole range of things, on our involvement, for example, with the Philae lander and the wonderful news we have from the comet in the last day or two that it's woken up, it's got close to the sun. I'm a massive space nerd. Okay, and those sorts of things speak to me of the wonder of the universe, and I want us to encourage our children to wonder and to speculate and be excited and to want to create and to innovate. And that is what you do when you invest in science and you allow it to be something that people get a buzz for when they are young, and when they are older they see as a career and a way of underpinning a growing economy that is based on real strong foundations.
Well, I have the misfortune to follow on from 3 generations of professors in my family, which is pretty depressing, all of whom were involved in science or maths. And my dad was a world-leading climatologist. And so I've just been brought up with this as absolutely central to my life. And then you have a grubby politician. So what a decline of a family. So for me, this country has a choice. We can go down the route of low-wage, low-skill economy, which I sense ever increasingly that the Tories favour that approach with their plan to cut in real terms spending on education and on colleges and on universities for maintenance fees or maintenance grants. All of that points towards a reduced interest in learning and in education, which is fatal for our country. Or you can choose a high-skill, high-wage economy, which is what we should be in favour of. And you do that by investing in education, which we are totally committed to, and science education in particular. And we have a fantastic head start in this country with our science base. And I'll give you one particular area which I am passionate about, where we need the inventiveness of scientists to come up with solutions. We face the bankruptcy of our health and care system if we don't find solutions to the challenge of dementia. This can overwhelm us. Science can provide the answers, and we need to make that investment as a country, both to become a really successful modern economy, but also to find some of the big solutions to the challenges that we face as a society today. By innovating, by investment in research, we become a modern economy and we come up with solutions. That's the approach that Liberal Democrats must always favour.
Okay, Holly's spokesman next, but Pete Thornton at the front. Rob is next one.
So I'm virtually Holly Matthews from LGBT plus Lib Dems. One issue with equality is that of internationality and minorities within minorities being left behind. For example, we managed to deliver same-sex marriage in government, but that legislation included the spousal veto, which can prevent trans people getting legal gender recognition. And while we had a large number of LGBT parliamentary candidates in the election, the vast majority of them were white, gay or bisexual men, compared to the remainder of the LGBT plus and BAME spectrums. What can the party and you as leader do to address this and make sure that we're not just being tokenistic when it comes to diversity?
Norman?
Well, first of all, we shouldn't pass by without absolutely recognising the triumph that Lynn Featherstone achieved in that last Parliament. It is down to Lynn's perseverance that we have secured same-sex marriage in this country. It would not have happened without our perseverance and without Lynn leading the charge. And we owe her an enormous debt of gratitude. And she's an incredible loss to Parliament, the fact that she's no longer there. Secondly, I completely support the idea of removing the spousal veto. It's an anachronism that needs to go. And our principle should surely be that every person, whoever they are, whatever they want to do, however they want to lead their life, should be treated equally. Should be treated on the basis of their merits as individuals and their aspirations. And there should be no bar in this party or in society to someone because of who they are. And that still remains the case in society. We've made enormous progress over the last 2 decades in this country and across the world, but there is still a long way to go. And if there's any party that must always lead the charge to ensure that every person gets treated equally, then it must surely be this one.
Yeah, and Dave, sorry, it's not Dave. On whose behalf are you speaking again, Dave? Holly, sorry. So Dave, I'm channeling through Dave to Holly. I think that the essence of a liberal is the person who stands up for the powerless and stands up for sometimes even the unpopular powerless and those who don't speak for themselves. And there is a real danger in all communities of what happens to the minority within the minority. And that happens across the country, and indeed across the world. And so it's absolutely right, as Norman says, that we should celebrate the fact that Liberal Democrats managed to change the law to bring in equal marriage. We should not get complacent because we failed to deal with the spousal veto, which is a reminder that we have given equality of marriage but isn't fully equal, and the spousal veto must be removed. But I think, how do you get into other communities? And Dave, you reflect, and you've probably done more homework on the stats than I have, that even people who come from minority communities come from perhaps the more advantaged end of those minority communities, and I'm prepared to believe that. I think the issue is for Liberal Democrats, how do we immerse ourselves into communities, whether they be communities that are geographical or communities that are nationwide, whatever they may be. And the issue is, you've got to make sure you go to where those people are and understand that the reason why people from the more persecuted minorities, the more groups of people we don't currently have within our party, is because we don't talk to them, we don't communicate to them, we don't communicate with them. And for example, in my neck of the woods, do something called football surgeries with our kids on the estates, and it's a way of going to places. And basically, we advertise, we put out a leaflet the day before, I do it over half term, and the day after, I turn up, and so do 100 kids, and we play 27 aside for an hour or so. And then we sit down, and we talk about issues, whatever they might be. And very often, it's the younger kids think they see not enough of the police, and the older kids think they see too much of the police. But the point is that, actually, the point is that you break down barriers, and as a consequence of one of those events, 3 months or 4 months later, a young woman who was 14 Facebook messaged me at 4 o'clock in the morning because she was about, her mum was to be evicted and her with her the following morning. And what are the chances of that mother getting in touch with us? Well, clearly none. What are the chances of a 14-year-old young woman getting in touch with us? Absolutely none. The point is, we're able to stop that eviction and rehouse that family because we put ourselves in places where other politicians don't go, and that is how you get to those people.
Okay, Peter next, and Lynn Thompson from Oldham. Lynn, where are you? There we are. Thank you. Peter?
Norman, Tim, this being a local government conference, we've talked quite a lot about the council base and the parliamentary party. Just to give you a dilemma, if you were leader and you were forced to choose between having an extra MP or us running an extra council, which one would you choose and why?
Me, I guess, isn't it?
Aye.
Okay. Well, I'm going to guess...
He is your leader.
He is, I know, he is the leader.
Be very careful, eh?
Obviously, there's Penrith in the border. No, okay. It depends how that extra MP came about, because, we don't just mourn Charles Kennedy this week, we mourn David Bellotti. David Bellotti won the Eastbourne by-election for us after, only 13 months after our annihilation at the European elections in 1989. And I am reminded of the fact that whilst our survival may not be inevitable, neither is it inevitable that it has to take forever. And so one can lead to the other, and we often, we talked to it on our council seats, a way of winning parliamentary seats. Well, our parliamentary seats are a way of winning council seats. But if you're asking me to decide what would make the difference between, and what's the difference between an MP and an extra Liberal Democrat run council, at this moment, we'll have an extra Liberal Democrat run council. Because that way, 100,000 people or more get Liberal Democrat policies, get people building affordable homes for them, get green energy set up locally, get people who are on the ground and looking after them and making a difference, defending social care against the Tory cuts. And, I'd love to have a 9th Member of Parliament, and I wish nobody any harm, but the next by-election can't come soon enough. But we need to understand that they are both important. But if you make me choose, I want a Liberal Democrat council.
Well, as someone who is just completely committed to localism and to the whole principle of giving power to people and to communities, my interest in winning power in councils is not, fundamentally not, emphatically not, about a route to winning a parliamentary seat. I'm just not interested in that. I'm interested in us building power locally and nationally, and I want us to break through locally and nationally. But I want us as a party to understand the really important principle that we win power locally in its own right, for its own sake. And so I think it's a bit of a false distinction. I want to win wherever we can win. But I absolutely want to win councils because it can change people's lives. We can I made the distinction earlier between the way Labour councils behave and indeed the way Tory councils behave and us. And they are about doing things to people. We are about empowering people, giving people power in their communities. There's nothing more important than that for me. So we must always be doing it for that reason, not as a route to something else.
Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, we're just getting to 5 o'clock. It's been a really interesting time. Would people cope with staying for a few more questions? Yeah. Okay, let's go. So, Lynn. Where are you, Lynn? And the next person to stand by is Richard Outram, another person from Oldham. Richard, you have done a very long question. Can you please make it a bit shorter, please? So, Lynn.
Many years ago, I was attracted to join a party which characterised itself as radical. How radical will our party be under your leadership?
I want us to be absolutely radical, and let me say why. First of all, it's because I want us to be true to what we believe in. And I think we believe in making policy on the basis of good evidence and of the whole principle of giving power to people. And if we apply those principles, the change we want in society is radically different. And we must be true to those principles, completely. And so I want us to ensure that we develop a platform of policies that speaks to our values, that makes people understand what motivates us and what drives us. And I think, unless we do that, we will be an irrelevance. What is the point of a sort of pale imitation of another party, or of a party that is seen as an adjunct of another party? There is no point in that. There is no point in us making a monumental effort to win elections, whether we're at the parliamentary level or at the local government level, unless we're fighting for things that we really, really believe in. That's what motivates us. It's what motivates our activists. And I want us to return to that. So I want us, for example, to make the case for radical reform of our antiquated drug laws. These are outrageous. We criminalise so many young people on the basis of a policy of prohibition that doesn't actually make any sense. And young people recognise that it's crazy to criminalise people while at the same time handing enormous sums of money to drug barons across the world. So let's be edgy, let's be prepared to take risks sometimes, let's deliver policies that really do give power to people in their communities. Let's radically argue the case for decentralisation of power. In Sweden, most people don't pay any national income tax. It's because services are funded by taxes raised locally. That gives power to local authorities in Sweden in a way that we never have it in this country. We have a dependency culture here, which we must break by giving real power to our communities to transform those lives.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, I joined the Young Liberals. I am a radical liberal, and I detest the notion that we should be some kind of mushy in the middle party. There's nothing for us there. Absolutely nothing for us whatsoever. We give people, as I said earlier on, the reason, a good argument may be to give us a second preference in an AV election. Well, that's not what we have, and we've got to earn people's votes. We have to be radical and we have to be relevant. We have to talk about the issues that other people are talking about. And people are talking about housing, so we need to lead the campaign against the housing association sell-off. People are talking about immigration, and so we need to be the spiky people who say, hang on, immigration is a blessing, not a curse. We need to be the people who... Not just because that is right, because it speaks to people about who we are. And do you know what? I don't expect to get 30, 40, 50% of the vote at the next election. You'll be disappointed to hear. But you know what? I'll take 25, 26, 27%. I will take enough people deciding that we are annoying enough to vote against, that there's enough people who take notice of us to vote for. It's nothing in us whatsoever in being safe and soft and centrist. I want us to be the party leading the argument on climate change because we want to convince people it is an existential threat, it matters to them, and we have the answers that are big and bold. And the answers to climate change are not boring hair shirt and austerity, they are big, they are absolutely elevated, they are about a green renewal, about building 30 tidal barrages around this country and making sure that we tackle climate change in a way which is absolutely affirming, patriotic, a together movement. If we can do that, we will be radical, we will be relevant, and we will win elections.
Richard Outram, where are you? Have you got a microphone?
Yes, I have.
Great. And Damien Bond. Damien, where are you? In the next one. Okay, Richard first.
Good afternoon. My name is Richard Outram. I'm the Policy Advisor and Researcher to the Oldham Liberal Democrat Council Group, and as we just won an award for being a great campaigning group, very chuffed. My question, Chair candidates, is with the current focus on the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Waterloo, it's very easy to forget that the nations of the European Union have just enjoyed an unprecedented 70 years of peace. But that peace is under threat. We've got war in Ukraine, we've got tensions between NATO and resurgent Russia. We've also got the threat by the new Tory government to replace Trident, which again will increase nuclear tensions. My question to the candidates is, I'd like to ask the two leadership candidates what they will commit to as party leader to advance the cause of peace in Europe, and what particularly they would do to advance European Union initiatives such as the Pledge to Peace.
Well, yeah. I mean, Richard, I think you've kind of taken me to the place that I want to take us in leading the campaign in favour of the UK staying in the European Union. You see, the Yes campaign for our membership of the EU, when that referendum comes, I predict if it's anything to do with the Labour Party or the Tory Party, will be uninspiring, utterly safe and dull and pragmatic. You see, there are many good things about our membership of the European Union, and they're right for us to put forward. The fact that it is absolutely underpinning so many jobs, the fact that it does help us to trace criminals across boundaries, all of those really good and important things. But you know what? I want us to be loftier than that. I want us to be more inspirational than that. I want us to speak about the European Union as the most successful peace process in human history. I remember, and people laugh at this, it's absolutely true, I remember the day that the old laundrette on Fishergate Hill in Preston got remade over and opened up as a nuclear fallout shelter showroom in 1984. It really happened. I thought, flipping heck, it's about to happen. And I think, if you live through those years, you realise that those were terrifying times. And you know what? Sat round the table today in Brussels, 28 ministers from different countries arguing the toss about fishing quotas, who 25 years ago had nuclear weapons pointed at each other. 5 countries with nuclear weapons pointed at this city. If that was the only reason being in the European Union, that would be good enough for me. Now then. In quick analysis of your question, the reality is that we should be signing up to all of the work the European Union does in building peace around the world, making sure that we stand firm for human rights, making sure that we do not rush into like-for-like replacement of Trident, which will be an act of military aggression as well as a waste of money, in my humble opinion. And we need to make sure that money is actually spent on our military in a way to keep us safe. The generals don't want us to like-for-like replace Trident. They want to spend that money not on giving P45s to our soldiers, but having a decent army, because that is the way you prevent war and maintain peace in our country.
I can remember as a child on holiday in Germany, driving through the countryside and down a lane to the point on the road where it stopped and where the barbed wire fence cut across. And this was the border between East and West Germany. And I looked at the watchtowers and I looked at the soldiers watching over people in fields on the other side. And I saw the ploughed strip of land which was mined, and the way in which they were keeping people in that country, stopping them from escaping to the west. And it's not that long ago. And the triumph of this continent is that we have turned our back on conflict, that we have brought in countries from the Soviet bloc, and we now trade with them, we do business with them. I was on 3 European councils in my short, glorious 8 months as a business minister under Vince Cable. And when I sat there negotiating over sometimes the most ridiculous things, I thought to myself, well, this is a heck of a lot better than what it used to be in this continent. This is a triumph of peace over conflict. And that's the reason why we have to argue the case for this country remaining in the European Union.
So I got elected to Lancashire County Council, Leyland Central, in May 1993. I joined the Association of Liberal Democrat Councillors in January 1993, and the latter is why the former happened. If you want to get elected, if you want to win in your community, you want to make a difference to the people you serve or want to serve, join ALDC. They will get you there.
Hello, I'm Norman Lamb and I'm standing for the leadership of the party. I was a councillor between 1987 and 1991. I ended up leading the group on Norwich City Council. I was always a member of this organisation and its predecessor, and I've always found it totally invaluable in helping me understand how to fight elections, how to win elections, and also guiding me on policy initiatives and ideas. And it's an invaluable organisation to be a member of, so I would encourage anyone who is interested in standing for the council, who is an existing councillor, or anyone else who has any involvement in campaigning at a grassroots level for council elections, to join up to ALDC. It's a really worthwhile investment.